I'm Ryan Brown, and this is the Unvarnished podcast. And this is another episode in our slightly different format, just hanging out with friends. Today we're with Stacy Minch in her studio with her beautiful work behind us. And I was kind of hoping to have Katie here, but it's her birthday, so...
Happy birthday, Katie.
Happy birthday, Katie. And so the last episode was on art education, and I think I got that out of my system. It was meant to be a little bit more monologue oriented. So for those of you that was helpful for, great. For those of you that hated that, this will be hopefully a little different. I'm going to try to leave a little bit more space for you to talk here.
Sounds good.
Yeah, but the idea with some of these episodes where I'm not traveling to, well, I guess I am traveling to visit your studio, but, where I'm not traveling to New York or Paris or something to visit people's studios, I just want to kind of cover some art topics. And last one was art education. This one we're going to talk a little bit more about what art means individually to us, maybe a little bit what our motivation was getting into it, now that we've been in it for a little while, how that motivation has shifted, adjusted, become more robust, more purposeful, how we've gotten to figure ourselves out maybe, and then,
Apologize for the coughing.
Maybe we get around to talking about a little bit of the business of art. We'll see where this goes.
Sure.
But yeah, it just I don't know where to begin. It's a pretty broad question. What is art? And I think you're going to get as many different answers as people you ask. But I'll just start with a quote from Aristotle.
Okay.
He said, "The aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance."
I've heard that one. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. Here's another one by Charles Hawthorne, who was the founder of the Cape Cod School of Art. He said, "The only way a painter can appeal to humanity is to show people more than they already see. And he must show them with so much human sympathy and understanding that they will recognize it as if they themselves had seen the beauty and the glory." To me, that quote says a lot about how I felt when I was younger. I was always amazed that you had this still object, painting, sculpture, whatever it was, that somehow captivated my imagination. It grabbed my attention. It held me there for a long period of time. There was the human achievement element that I responded to. The fact that somebody could actually do something that brilliant was always amazing to me. And I guess I just kind of fell into early on the idea that maybe I was a little naive as well, but I felt like how cool would it be if I could make something that made them feel like I felt when I sat in front of this other painting. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. And I think we've had conversations like this before, but for you, human achievement is such like a pinnacle of interest. Even when you're talking about basketball or other things where it's like the ability to do something incredibly skillful is so interesting to you. So maybe when you were starting out, like that was what drew you to it? Or?
In part, yeah. I mean, it was always a part of it. It was, yeah. I can't tell you how much, what percentage a part of it was, but it was always there as a factor, which made me sort of, again, coming from no art background, I feel like I was just responding in the most completely blank slate way. Like, this is just...
It's amazing.
Yeah, there's no indoctrination there. There's no nobody saying you should like this or you should like that. It was a pure blank slate response to what I was seeing. And so the things that always did not make sense to me were these scribbles and the, the Cy Twombly, Jackson Pollock stuff never resonated in any sort of Mark Rothko, like, and it wasn't until I got into art school that you start hearing more about it. Maybe take art history and you hear what the art historians have written, and you try to buy into it. You try to like understand what they're saying because you don't want to feel stupid. You feel like there's something you're missing maybe, but it never...
Those didn't appeal to you.
Yeah,
it's interesting
it didn't feel like the human. There was no human achievement.
But for me, like looking at Masterworks when I was younger, especially like I was always interested in art in junior high, high school, college. I was always taking art classes. But I would look at those things and I would feel so overwhelmed by them. Like I could never do it. So I shouldn't even try. But for you looked at that and it's like, this is human achievement. I am going for that. It's interesting where I probably leaned more toward like the emotive side. Like I did like Jackson Pollock and I did like Mark Rothko because it was so accessible. It's like, I like, it's a feeling, it's not just about the skill. It's like you're saying something about what you feel or who you are.
Yeah, I never got that. I still don't get that. I think it was, I mean, I was overwhelmed by the masters too. It wasn't like I looked at Michelangelo and was like, I can do that.
Not that you can do it, but I'm going to reach for it. Whereas I looked at it and I was like, I understand like this is a really important and interesting language. I remember going to the Art Institute of Chicago when I was 18 for the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, oh, they're speaking my language. Like I see this, like this is like my thing, but I could never do that. So it was kind of demotivating for me just to see that human achievement because it felt so out of reach.
That's interesting. I do wonder how that affects other people when they're considering whether or not to pursue something like this. Because I even in music, I always loved music, but I didn't grow up in a household that had music. My parents never listened to music, never in the car, never, ever. And so it wasn't until like early high school where I heard Bob Dylan for the first time, and it was...
He's amazing.
Yeah, it blew my mind.
It's like poetry and music and just like this amazing amalgamation of who he
like
was.
Discovering this whole new world. But before that, I had I was in band and whatever, and my parents had season tickets to the Utah Symphony, and they didn't always want to go. I mean, typically like one of them wasn't going to go or something.
Yeah. How did they get tickets though?
Well, they just bought season tickets.
But they didn't.
They didn't always go.
Do music, but they bought tickets.
Well, they went. My aunt and uncle had them as well, and so it was kind of like
it's like a
maybe
cool
a date
family
night
couple
sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I got when they didn't go, which was quite often. They would ask, who wants to go, and it was always me. And even then, it was like I would sit in this balcony and watch 40 people, 50 people. Playing in perfect harmony and rhythm, and everyone had their, I played an instrument at that time, so I kind of got a sense for how difficult it was, and then to have everybody on key and,
in unison
totally
and at the right volume
at such
and
complexity.
With dynamics and everything. Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and that, I mean, there's a crossover there where it's just like somebody did that. But I always felt like, as I was sitting there, like I think I could do that. I think I could break this down and write something like that.
Where did you get that confidence?
I don't know. It's just a naive,
intrinsic sort
if somebody else
does it,
I could
I'm
do
just as good. I can do that too.
Or I could be just
as good
if I really pursued this. But it wasn't the idea that like I want that kind of similar glory that maybe they have, or it wasn't like I would when my thought was I want to go achieve something like that. It was more like I feel so much in this moment through this performance, or standing in front of this painting. Is there any way I could give that same experience to somebody else?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was really the main motivation.
Come here. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I grew up in a house where there was music. My older sister's like a concert level pianist. She's amazing. And I guess for me, like, music wasn't mysterious because, come here, sorry, because I saw the work that went into it. It was like, I see that and I understand it and I don't want to do it. Like when I was 11, I totally quit piano lessons because I was like, that's not the life I want. But I think there was an element to that with the art too, where you can look at that and you can see like how difficult that is and how many hours go into it. And it just feels overwhelming to think about the time and the effort on some level.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I think about that when it comes to looking back at what I did to be where I'm at in painting and, 20 years in, still doing it and still able to make a living at it and continue to try to get better and whatever. But that optimism the
maybe it's a naivete that like, it's just like, I don't even realize what I'm getting myself into.
Oh, totally. That's 100%. I tell people if I knew beforehand, I would have never thought, the naive optimism was, I'd love to make that experience for someone else. The naive optimism was I was only capable of thinking that or even hoping for that because I had no idea how hard it would be to actually do something. The dedication and the hours and the sacrifice and I had no idea. And if I did, I'd probably be working at Costco. It's so much easier.
I think I did. I think I could see that. And maybe it's because of my background with watching my sister with like this piano and everything, like seeing the dedication and the work that goes into that. I could sense that it was so big and I felt overwhelmed by it. So I went a different route and didn't do art for so long. But you can only like push that off so long if it's in you. I feel like it eventually caught up to me and I had to just say, okay, this is what I need to do. And it is going to be hard. And it still is hard, it's not easy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a difficulty that ever leaves. The difficulties might change, but I tell my kids that when you find out what it is that you really love to do, there's two choices. One is you could say, I want to do this for the rest of my life. But if you say that and couple that with, I also want to make it my living, you've now taken something that you love and you've made it a job. And but the thing that I tell my kids is that no matter what you're doing, the majority of that task is work. It's stuff you don't want to do. Even
if you love it. I mean, you have that quote that's like, if you're doing what you love, you'll never have a day of work in your life. It's so wrong.
Nonsense.
It's so wrong. It's just absolutely wrong.
Yeah. But if you choose it, then the solace comes in like this is a difficulty I'm doing on purpose.
This is my calling. This is what I'm devoting my life to. Yeah. So
I think that's a big difference. Yeah. Having difficulties that are thrust upon you, that are chosen for you, or choosing them yourself. I think it's a completely different way of living your life. And I think the artistic life, being an artist, that's probably the thing that gives me the most comfort. Is like, this is really hard, but it's the hard that I wanted.
Yeah, you chose it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we talk about like stylistically, we touched a little bit on what kind of brought us into art, what we responded to naturally. When you get to the more you've been in it, if intrinsically Jackson Pollock and Rothko and those others did resonate with you, the more you get into it and the more you'd studied, the more time you put into developing your skills, has it shifted for you at all? The whatever it is that motivates you in terms of art, whatever it is that you want to achieve, and then how has it affected your appreciation?
I have a really broad range of things that I like. I think stepping into the atelier world was a little bit hard for me because I could see that it kind of narrowed the scope. Where it's like, this is how you're supposed to do things. This is the way it's supposed to go. I could see the value in it, and I wanted to develop that skill. But as far as like appreciating other things, I still do. And it's not that I mean, I definitely lean towards representational work, but I also enjoy walking past an enormous Jackson Pollock. There's just like a feeling to it. And I think for me, like art is definitely about a feeling. And I think it started that way for me. I think back to being a kid when I was like 5 and drawing things. Why was I drawing?
Yeah.
It was like usually, you know, I loved someone and I wanted to tell them, so I would draw them something and I'd give it to them, and it was silly. I mean, I don't know how many things I drew from my mom and my dad and my sister, you know, like it was that I wanted to express something. So at that point, you know, it was this pure form of expression. It was from imagination, and it was something that was an expressive quality. So I think that's kind of how art started for me. Now, as you get older, you start to realize like, oh, some people are like good at doing this. Like some people are better than others. And I was always a kid in class that was, you know, kind of good at it. And so people noticed that and they'd be copying my stuff and, you know, things like that. So then it became a little bit more about achievement. Like, oh, I can like draw stuff so it looks like the thing. And, but it's like this
and that positive reinforcement helps, right?
For sure. But it's a constantly evolving sort of relationship with it. I think it will probably continue to evolve throughout my life. You know, as I was entering your atelier and studying there, then it's all about the skill building. It's just like, okay, I just have to like figure this out. I have to learn how to draw. I have to be more efficient. I have to do it quickly because I'm limited for time. And sorry, are you okay with the dog?
I'm okay with the dog.
Okay. He's very friendly. But yeah, now that I'm out of that, it feels like kind of floundering for a little while, you know? But as I think about like what art means to me now or why I wanted to get into it, I think it was just like a part of me that I couldn't deny anymore.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not doing this, I'm not fully being myself. I'm not fully expressing as myself. At the time that I started studying with you, like I had been through a really horrible postpartum depression, and I was like coming out of that. And well, there's a quote over there on that book. It says, art is the highest form of hope. And I think at that time for me, it really was like, you know, it's just like this vehicle for hope. Like there is like some purpose in moving forward. There is something that I'm going to do here that gives my life more meaning or more purpose. And I think it was also, maybe I was having some sort of existential crisis at the time, but art kind of feels like a way of leaving some sort of trace, you know? Yeah. Like a way of dealing with your own mortality. Like, okay, I'm here for this really short time. Like, I just want to say that I was here, that I noticed it, that it like mattered to me. And it's kind of a way to leave like a piece of yourself in the world. So I don't know. I don't know what art means to me right now. Mostly right now, it's kind of just trying to find my way, but I think that's what brought me back into it, really.
Yeah, I don't know. I've felt that sort of, not a longing, but I guess an awareness that this is a way to leave something. Yeah. That I remember
that will last.
Yeah, I don't know that it was a motivation for me really ever, but it's certainly something that occurred to me. Especially the older I get, I think, you know, time
goes faster.
And it's so easy
speeding by.
It's so easy for people to move on. I mean, I always think if I died in a car accident tomorrow, you know, my kids still got to go to school the next week, and there's and everybody's self-absorbed, you know, for good reason. I mean, you got to live your life, but yeah, I mean, how are my kids going to remember me? That those memories start to fade and they become vague. And then, but what do you have? And I think, I mean, today we have a lot more because you have everybody's photographed.
All your
and,
social media, and you have people's thoughts recorded, and
right,
videos and pictures that you wouldn't have had, 30 years ago.
Yeah, but leaving something that is.
But it's very intentional.
Intentional, and it's like maybe the deepest form of self-expression, and you get to leave that. I think that is appealing to me, more in hindsight, not necessarily as a motivator to do it. But I think that where you're at in terms of, you mentioned like you're kind of floundering. I think that's such a necessary, and probably should be a constant companion, right? Because it shows that there's still
searching.
a hope for more self-discovery, and the one painting is fulfilling and you have a certain idea for that, but you have a million other ideas that you want to pursue. You have a lot of other things you want to attempt, and so it's never ending. There's this constant feeling of clumsiness, no matter how adept you get technically, or no matter how many times you paint a waterfall, you're still trying to figure something out and say it maybe a little bit differently or whatever. And I think that is I think that uncomfortable feeling can chase people away sometimes.
Or kind of get them trapped into a lane of doing the same thing over and over, perhaps.
They run to that sort of
like
comfortable
this,
path.
I'm good at this one thing and I'm comfortable doing this. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as it's fulfilling for you. And as soon as it's not, like, it's okay to
pivot,
mess up a few times trying to do something new.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where you have to sort of embrace the clumsiness and know that if you're willing to go through it, the clumsiness dissipates over time, and it becomes more. I mean, you fill in the gaps of your weaknesses, but not if you don't confront it.
Yeah. And you kind of forget about the things that used to be hard. I mean, I was at a drawing session in Paris the other day, and someone's talking about their drawing, and, I just wish it would be easier. And I'm like, well, it doesn't get easy. But then I was like, but it does get easier, the drawing, you won't think about it so much.
Yeah.
Like at a certain point, like you can draw a figure anytime. Like I was hadn't slept for 30 hours and I drew a decent figure. I mean, it wasn't finished, but like you just start to understand things in a way,
right.
and then you find new problems that are just as challenging. So it does get easier. It's kind of like, raising kids. People say, well, does it get easier? Yes, absolutely. Like I don't have to change diapers anymore, but there's like a new set of problems. It's a different heart. It's just always evolving. And I hope that my art is always like that, because otherwise like it could get really boring. Yeah.
It can get sort of production line.
You don't want it to turn into like, this is the factory where I turn out, a floral on a teacup. I don't know.
Right.
Like there's that decorative aspect, and I wouldn't want my work to kind of turn into that sort of like I'm just making a decoration over and over.
Right. Yeah, it feels a little bit artistically stagnant.
Yeah.
I remember Bill Whitaker used to say, in the beginning you work this hard and you get this much better. And the more experience you have, you work this hard to get this much better.
Yeah. It's true.
I mean, it never ends. It never gets, certain aspects become second nature. You can see things more clearly, and once you own information, it's yours. Yeah.
I can always figure out a proportion because I just know how to do that.
Right.
I can triangulate it. I can measure it,
But I think you have to, when you build that foundation, it's important to build that foundation because it's very difficult to concentrate on higher principles or more complex things if you're still struggling with the basic things. So it's a natural progression of human development that, depending on what your goals are, I mean, everybody's got to go through it. So
Yeah, I guess that's assuming that, proportion is your goal, because for some people it's not.
Right. Yes.
For the Jackson Pollocks of the world, it does not matter one bit.
That's true.
But that doesn't mean their work doesn't have value.
Yeah, I think, I guess my bias, and I clearly have one.
Yes.
Is that there's this I know Edwin Austin Abbey talked about it. I should have brought a quote by him. He talks about, wanting to see that the artist labored, that he worked to pull this out, that it wasn't just this slapdash sort of sketched off thing that you claim some of the deficiencies as your style or whatever. But I want to see that you worked at this. And what he's saying is like you're trying to give me something here. Give me your best. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I always felt.
Yeah.
And I feel like the contemporary art, like a Mark Rothko or Jackson Pollock or de Kooning or whatever, I don't feel like their effort is there to the same degree that they really, really care about the audience. And to me, art has always been a service-oriented pursuit. You're trying to communicate. It's that to me, if I could define it, art is a visual language that is either legible or it's not. Mm-hmm. And if you have a message that you want to share with somebody, emotional message, a cerebral message, a narrative, whatever, you're using a medium that has certain strengths. And it's a visual medium. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to try and say something clearly, if you really want to share that message and have it reach the most people, then you have to reach them on their level. And there's a distinct human connection that we all have in terms of our collective human experience that is the natural world. Mm-hmm. And yes, we all have imaginations, we all have dreams, we all have wacky things that come into our head, but there's a relatability to the common human experience that representational painting speaks to. And so when you play this hierarchy, and maybe you don't have to have a hierarchy, but I always have a hierarchy. Yeah. Then I could see a place for Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko. It's just way down on the level of visual experience than, say, a great Bastien Lepage or John Leon Jerome or whatever, because they're speaking, to me, that's the symphony of language. It's this complex organization of visual sounds that makes sense immediately to the viewer, that doesn't deny their ability to bring their own narrative to it. But it attaches to their common human experience versus going to a concert and listening to people bang pots and pans and trying to dance to that. Yeah. That's, to me, it's like I always think about it in terms of music or movies. I think there's a lot of crossover in these art forms. And, if you go to a movie that has no plot, no storyline, no legible dialogue or intelligible dialogue, and the music is, comes in at weird times, you're taking the art form and you're dismantling all of its parts in a totally unintelligible way. And then you're trying to sell it as an art form that it's not. Yeah. And you could say, well, that's really interesting. Look how he did that. But I always think about it in terms of, I think basketball is an art. It would be like somebody valuing how a less experienced guy who doesn't really put in the practice, doesn't know the fundamentals, how interesting is it how he dribbles off his foot or misses the basket completely when he shoots it. He does it, his way of missing is so interesting. But you've changed what the thing is. It's no longer basketball.
But this goes back to somebody's definition of art. This is based on your definition of art, because in your world, art has these clearly defined rules, just like basketball does. And if somebody steps out of that, then it doesn't resonate with your value system for what art is. But for somebody else, art might not be about transmitting a clear idea. It might be about, having sort of this nebulous representation of maybe somebody's impression of a feeling or something. So it all kind of circles back to this idea that, like, what is art to you?
Yeah.
And everybody has their own definition for it, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think what I wouldn't want to do is, and this hasn't always been true.
Okay.
When I was really young, starting out, I wish it would just all go away, all the contemporary stuff.
Oh.
I don't feel that way anymore. I think there's a place for everything. I think that anyone that has a creative motivation, that wants to make something, I feel like there has to be room for them to do that without a feeling, that oppressive feeling of judgment, or that feeling like you had when you look at the Masters.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if I
couldn't do it, so I might as well not try.
Not even try. Yeah, I think I'd love to see anyone who has a creative motivation have the freedom and confidence to be able to pursue that, with or without skill, with or without training. I think there's a place for that, but I also think that when it comes, there is a reality that art has value, which is all perceived, which we could talk about later if we want to talk about the business of art.
Yeah.
But I feel like that the value should be higher for those who have
skill,
dedicated more, who have bled more for it, who have
but what if there's somebody who hasn't, but they have a pure intention and it comes out?
Good for them. I just don't think
it doesn't resonate with your value system.
Yeah. And again, it's my value system.
Yeah.
I'm not pretending.
But somebody else will have a different opinion if they see, like, this paint splotch that's been, smeared in this, there's all these different things that people do, but somebody else might have a perception of art where that is the highest form of hope. Like, that is maybe the most interesting thing to them. And we're all different, and we all have these different perceptions of what life is, of what it means to achieve, what it means to express. So I think there's room for everyone in the art world. Yeah.
I mean, I look at when I lived in Florence, I found beauty in the crumbling wall with like a little leaf growing out of a crack. I found beauty in the chaos of that, that sort of abstract quality of
the dandelion
textures
growing out of the parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, there is a beauty in chaos. I think maybe the difference I find is intent and purposefulness. When I see what Cy Twombly just sold for $17-18 million, to me, there's
it's incredible.
No purpose in what he's doing. There's a post-prescribed narrative that I feel like more critics and art historians attach to it, that I don't feel there was ever that in his, when he's working and his mind is swirling this, stuff around.
Like, people are imposing more meaning on the artwork than was actually intended. Yeah. Okay.
And I think that, I
think it's totally possible. I mean, sometimes people look at my painting and say stuff, and I'm like, well, okay, yeah. Yeah. That was totally it.
And I feel like when I look at what my definition of professionalism is like dedication to a thing, a lot of hard work, and a lot of like disciplined, purposeful intent. Yeah. There's painters that I don't necessarily like their work, but I feel like it's so professionally done. Like, they care so much about what they're doing. They did their absolute best. Okay. And when I'm at the Louvre and I see the Cy Twombly ceiling, I think, you're cheating people. You're not.
I didn't see that. I wonder how much of the Louvre I missed. Probably a lot.
But when you see, like, you were just in Paris, and when you see that Ferdinand Pelez of the
Oh my
the
gosh.
old woman with the
baby
kids
nursing.
it's
Oh my
like
gosh.
like you couldn't have
It breaks my
possibly
heart.
felt that more, painted it any better. This is your absolute best. This is a person who has given as much as they possibly could, and this is the result of that. And to me, that is so much more meaningful because they cared about what they were giving me. And
Yeah.
I just feel like Jackson Pollock didn't even think about it. He didn't really care about what other people were going to feel or whatever. He's just like, like maybe he felt something when he was doing it. That's fine to me. And good for him.
There is a feeling though, like walking by a Jackson Pollock that's like 20 feet high and 60 feet long. I mean, there is like an immersive experience to that does transmit a feeling, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, what's the saying? If you can't paint it well, paint it big. Is that the saying in the contemporary world? I see. I had an experience when I was still a student. I went to the National Gallery in D.C. for the first time, and I remember I had walked through 4 rooms, and I thought, nothing caught my eye, and I thought, oh, cool! It's so cool. They're having like a junior high school art show here or something. How cool for those kids that they could show in the National Gallery.
Yeah.
And I got to the 4th room right before it turned the corner, and I just happened to glance over at one of the tags, and it said Pablo Picasso, and I was like, I'd never seen a Picasso in person, so
Oh, really?
I was like, oh my god, what? Like, why is this in with the junior high school art show? And then I started really looking around, and they were all Picassos.
Yeah.
And at first I was like amazed. Oh my gosh, it's Picasso. But then I immediately realized I'm only impressed because of the name on the tag, not because of the work.
If you hadn't known, you wouldn't have been moved by it.
Yeah. And then I turned the corner, and there's this big Mark Rothko. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, what are you doing? That's like if you take like a millimeter by millimeter piece of a really well painted shirt from a Norman Rockwell, and you just blow it up to 6 feet by 6 feet. There you have this, color.
Immense abstraction.
Yeah. What is it?
Yeah.
It's a field of color. It's, I appreciate color too, but it's a part of it. It's a part
But
of
what
it.
if that's all you have to say?
Then you're a very, very dull person.
I don't know.
I think
that's kind of judgmental. But
travel more, read more. I think it's not difficult to have more to say than that. It's just like walking into a concert and then playing one note the whole time.
But maybe it is difficult to restrain yourself to that level of simplicity.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. I've never tried it, but
Yeah, it's a never-ending debate because it's personal, and I tend to.
I'm just
speak.
pushing your buttons on purpose, but
No, I mean you're not pushing my buttons at all. It's I accept that there's other opinions. I speak in sort of absolute terms,
right?
Because that's how I think.
It's how you were raised. We're in
but I don't.
Certain culture here.
I don't necessarily. I don't close the door
Yeah.
to the fact that other people enjoy something totally differently.
Yeah, it's totally valid.
I used to.
Yeah.
I used to be very obstinate about it. And
I think you were probably more obstinate about it when I first met you. What, like 8 or 9 years ago?
yeah, I was still holding on to that.
Yeah.
And I'm still obstinate in my own
Sure.
mind.
Sure, you have your own opinions, and everybody should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can't really get behind something that I don't feel like somebody is totally dedicated. And even that isn't a real statement because there's different ways of being dedicated.
was totally dedicated.
Yeah, it's a different way of being dedicated. He's not
But
dedicated to sitting there drawing.
It's not about human achievement. It's about personal expression.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah, completely different motivations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to get to, let me
Okay.
see. I wrote a bunch of stuff down. maybe it's valid, maybe it's not.
I'm sure all your thoughts are valid.
Okay. I wrote this down last night because I wanted to be somewhat prepared for this.
Okay.
It's okay. Maybe this will be a little bit redundant, but my thought was trying to define what art is. I said art is a visual language that can either be clearly understood through masterful execution or obscured by clumsy execution.
We're talking about visual art then.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, visual art.
Visual art. Yes.
Deliberate obscurity is in most cases where poorly developed skill meets a lack of imagination. That's what I think.
Like deliberately not having a clear message to your art is a result of, what did you say?
Poor skill and a lack of imagination. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that again, it's relative to the medium that you've chosen. If you're talking about pure emotion, like you could write a song that has no lyrics, and it could be the melody could be so touching that it just it's that raw emotion, but it's still organized in a manner that attaches to the human experience. Everybody in that room who listens to it is going to, maybe they feel it slightly differently, but most of them are going to feel it if it's organized in a particular way.
Modern composers that it's like just total chaos.
Yes, and that to me is...
It also is emotive, but in a very different way.
Yeah, or like modern dance. I've seen, video of modern dance, and again, I think like, you're moving, but you're now no longer within. You're now trying to take a certain art form and make it what it isn't. Right? You could claim to have made a movie, but it doesn't.
It's pushing the boundaries, which is its own. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not settled on how I feel about that either. Is it pushing the boundaries and expanding the possibilities of the art form, or is it just not the art form anymore? Is it something
it's its
different?
own new thing, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm not. I don't. I can't watch modern dance. I can't listen to
modern dance.
The banging sounds of chaos.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear, nonsense lyrics. I mean, Beck makes them funny sometimes, but I think there's something, and this is really what it comes down to for me. I think there's something in terms of my motivation and how I look at things that is very much relative to the common human experience that shows our interconnectedness and our sameness across cultures, across religions, across these artificial boundaries that we set for ourselves. It's a way of connecting on a human level that I think the best books transcend, the best music, the best paintings, the best poetry, the best film. It connects to the human condition, and that's what I'm looking for, even when it comes to my relationships. That I think, or food, right? I was talking about this, like I meant to paint all day yesterday, and I spent like 3 hours making a beef stew.
Oh,
just because I love that, like setting it in front of my kids and watching them and
enjoy it,
connecting through taste, right? And then I made something. I took my time to make something,
and they liked it
that you enjoy. Yeah.
Good. Good. I'm glad they weren't like, Dad, this is horrible.
Yeah, it happens occasionally. But I think it's that connection on a human level through the common experience that I'm really interested in. And so when I see things outside the boundaries of that, okay, so this is, I think the next thing I wrote has to do with this. So let me read this. Art as a function of society can either be a mirror that reflects or a hammer that builds. It is a function unique to our species. As a human endeavor, the most powerful art is that which communicates on a human level that can be comprehended and digested through the common human experience. Realism, naturalism, impressionism, whatever you want to call all that communicates clearly, will always be the most valued by society at large because we connect through the common human experience that representational art, at its best, offers its viewers. The further art, in quotes, the further art deviates from a society's general comprehension, the less relevant and useful it is for that society. The contemporary art market is a purely capitalistic cult. It has stolen the rational minds of the indoctrinated, with money being the new messiah. The definition that once was art, as an elevated element of a society that also feeds society, has been overwhelmed by the catastrophic, non-meaning, non-purpose, non-nourishing, uncreative nonsense whose purpose is to make money.
Yeah.
The term art has been hijacked by capitalists and created by largely incompetent so-called creatives who in many cases don't even make the art they're credited with. I'm thinking about like the Jeff Koons and the Damien Hirst and that nonsense.
The bananas taped to the wall.
The banana state, right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like this element of shock value or novelism that people attach monetary value to that just, it doesn't appeal to the masses. And if you talk to most people when they walk through a museum, most people go through the contemporary area and go, I don't get it.
Yeah, again, because it's separated from the like, human condition.
This is so special and outside of your realm of expertise that you can't understand it.
But also if it were
immediately relatable, they would relate to it.
Yeah, they did a study in London a few years ago where they just paid attention. They studied how long people stand in front of different works. And I think in front of contemporary non-representational stuff, it was less than 3 seconds that it grabbed their attention. And in front of the representational work, it was over 3 minutes. And that's a massive difference.
In front of a painting? I don't even believe that. That's crazy that people would stand in front of a painting 3 minutes. I never see that. You
don't stand in front of a painting
for
3 minutes?
No, I do, personally. But when you're walking through a museum, like that's the average?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they're saying in front of every painting.
Okay.
But in front of specific
paintings. I mean, there is that natural draw that humans have to other faces that definitely pulls that in. I mean, in advertising too, if there's a face on it.
It's the human condition. I mean,
we're interested in each other.
And in advertising, they know this. So if you're going to have trying to sell a Ford F-150, have a little narrative behind it that's touchy-feely. If you're, the narrative sells, but what narrative sells is the narrative that reaches the common collective experience. And so there's a recognition of the storyline, there's a recognition of the emotion because we've all felt it. And that's where I think the deviation, when art deviates from that, the further art deviates from that, the less relevant it becomes. Because it reaches to the general public. Yeah. And I think the general public is what the collective society is. And if you're trying to help not only define society, but maybe mirror it and share its values, connect with its audience, you kind of have to think about that. It's not, if you're making something for an elite few who, will pretend to understand it or whatever.
But that's where all the money is. I mean, when we're talking about art business, that gets to another level because the general public isn't really educated at all about art or even know what they like or have even seen art, could name like 3 artists. I mean, if you walked up to someone on the street, what are 3 contemporary artists you like?
But what do you think I think that's a self-sabotaging element of contemporary art because if you go back to the 19th century, obviously forms of entertainment were different then.
Right.
But when you have the annual salon in Paris, you have millions of people that come from all over the world to see this thing. And it was a massive event. People had an appreciation for it. So I've heard that a lot. Like, the general public doesn't understand art, but they don't understand art because the art world has made it intelligible. They've specifically shunned the public where they used to embrace them, right? 19th century art was meant to speak to an audience. Then you have our mutt and the urinal and the total breakdown of what art was trying to do for 400 or 500 years in terms of communicate. And now art shuns the public. Now art almost makes fun of them. It makes them feel stupid because it pretends to have a depth of meaning that it doesn't. And it leaves the general audience feeling stupid. But the general audience is these are the same people that watch movies, and they're the same people that listen to music, and they're the same people that read books. And you could take an average person and ask them what they think about the last movie, and they're going to have an opinion on it because they've seen a lot of movies.
Art has shifted from like visual pictorial representations to things that grab people's attention even more. Movies and...
Yeah, I mean, film certainly has become a huge form of entertainment, but I'm saying if there were more art being made like the 19th century salons, it's just packed with just masterpieces. If you had an exhibition today that had, 400 amazing paintings in it by world's leading artists, I think the general public could be interested in that and would be if you gave them something to feed on. If you go to an art show and it's nonsense you don't understand, you're just kind of making fun of it, and
don't we have
it's like a novelty.
Art shows like that though? I mean, are there exhibitions in cities that represent contemporary representational artists?
There's a few that are trying to come around, like the meme show is that in Madrid, Barcelona?
Or something.
The Almanera, the Art Renewal. I think there's attempts to make significant shows. It's just that
it's so far from our cultural narrative that no one would even think of it. You have to have some major backing behind it to get to people to even think about, like, do I want to go to an art show? Is that something, like, it's not even in somebody's mind. Like, I go to movies, I go to the mall, I do these things, but do I pack up the family and go see art?
But I think that in part is the art world's fault. Yeah. It's the contemporary art world's fault that they have for so long shunned the public that the public no longer cares about it. And I think, of course it can be changed, because when you walk in and see a great painting, you could know nothing about it and see the Lady of Shalott and just
just love it.
Yeah, I mean, kids respond to it, adults respond to it from all backgrounds. They're just not. It's not a part of the normal
human experience anymore.
It's been
going to see art isn't
separated.
Really a thing. I mean.
But it's a part of that is getting back. I mean, the ateliers, the academies really started to come back around 95. Trying to learn how to do the technical aspects of drawing and painting, sculpture, were largely
they were
absent in all the
abandoned.
Educational opportunities people had until maybe like 1995. I mean, there were small places like. Ives Gamma was still teaching, and
Black Atelier.
But it started to come back around in 95. Of course, it's going to take the artists time to get back to the level of skill and understanding where they can actually make paintings that grab an audience. And
so, if we're talking about the business of art, how do you elevate art again so that the business can be more robust? I mean, I think it's just kind of tough right now. But living in Utah here, I just feel like there isn't there is some art market for like small, low-priced things, I feel. But people aren't really that interested in acquiring original art. It's not really something that appeals to people's value systems here, where it's much more practical, much more frugal. I mean, there's just kind of this history of being pretty, I don't know, self-sufficient and not really
People seeing
diving
something
into
and saying, "I'll make
culture." I
just
could
make it
copy
myself.
that. Like
Yeah.
I saw this on or just like valuing frugality over.
Yeah, I
know.
think there's a lack of culture as well that.
But that's kind of mass American culture too. It's not.
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
just Utah. It's just kind of magnified here.
Right. Yeah, I think the appreciation of finer things requires some education. Reading, travel is all part of being able to appreciate. Like going to Paris, you were just in Paris. To me, when I was there the first time, it was just like so cities can look like this.
Right.
Like you don't have to build in America. Everything is built to replace in 30 years. It's totally utilitarian. There's no thought of
no attention to
making
aesthetic.
something
yeah,
lasting.
It's all practical. It's all whatever's the most efficient and the most cost effective.
Yeah, and I've been to plenty of cities where there was far more thought about aesthetic beauty, its connection to the land around it, even down to like farmhouses that use local stone that are still beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that lack of culture has something to do with it. But I mean, a lot of that's our fault. I would have debates with people, other artist friends of mine, like we should do more complex multi-figure narrative, like the Bouguereaus or the Jeromes or whatever.
That'd be great, but where are you going to put them?
Where are you going to put them?
Yeah.
But the argument was also, who's going to buy that? There's no audience for it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, how can there be an audience for something that
Create
doesn't
one.
exist?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the, if only one or two people are doing it, you're not really going to change an entire culture. But
I also think that it has to relate to them personally now as a society, because you look at these older paintings, people had a much more vast knowledge of like mythology and biblical stories and things like that, where they related to these paintings that maybe we don't relate to so much now. So what kind of multi-figural painting in a contemporary setting would relate to people's human experience now? It's kind of an interesting question.
Yeah, because you can't go back and try to recreate the past.
I mean, a lot of
because the
people
audience is
do
different.
try to do that. You look at the work people are making right now, and they dress people up in Renaissance clothes. I mean, like there is kind of this hearkening back to what was successful before, but we're in like a new world here. We're not living in 1600, and it is interesting to see somebody make something in the same kind of style as that, and it like you immediately latch onto it, like, oh, that's masterful. But does it relate to the general population? Is kind of how do we bridge that gap, especially with multifigural stuff, because people have different stories now.
Yeah, it'd be like trying to write a novel in Latin. It might sound beautiful, but
it's like,
nobody's going to be
great.
able to read it.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing as I've been saying about this collective human experience. It has to change. You can't speak in a dead language. And what I mean by that is not that, painting really well and, painting technically like the 19th century is the dead language. The dead language would be trying to paint peasants gathering hay or something. It's not really the same narrative. It's
interesting, it's historical, but it doesn't relate to what we're living right now.
Yeah, to me, I had just been emailing a little bit back and forth Bert Silverman, and he just had a retrospective show at the Salmagundi Club. Wow. And at the same time, Tracy Amin had a show. And of course, she was written up in the New York Times and blah blah blah, and tons of people showing out for the show. It's just there was some interesting aspects to the Tracy Amin show But again,
Yeah, I didn't see anything about that.
it feels very derivative of the other artists like Jenny Saville or whatever, just big oversized things.
Okay.
A lot of sketchy line drawing. Limited colors, kind of messy execution. And then, just down the road, you have Bert Silverman, who's painting his, he grew up in New York.
He does do more contemporary kind of figurative scenes. Yeah.
People on the street through the window of a restaurant, with the reflections of the city behind it. Friends of his that aren't the atypical beauty in the perfect pose and the perfect, dudes with cut off jean shorts that don't have a perfect body. And I mean, but there's a gritty reality to this lifelong New Yorker's world that he's sharing with brilliant execution that takes you into this world and shows you beauty where you may not have seen it before. And to me, that's noteworthy. That is something that the New York Times should glom onto, that should be promoted, that should be shared.
Yeah.
But it's not, because Tracy Eamon's a blue chip artist and there's money. There's the capitalism of it, right? So how do you change the art world? How do you alter the business of the art world? I don't know, but my running theory is that it's purely marketing.
Yeah. Yeah, marketing and just keep making it, I guess.
I mean, you could make it. That's another question.
I mean, it's interesting when you think about like that Fernand Pelez in the Petit Palais. Like when he created that painting, what was the response to that? Did people look at that and say that's a nitty gritty New York scene, or I don't know where it was painted, but like did they think like, well, that's just like, I don't really want to look at that because it's uncomfortable. I've seen that on the street. Yeah. Like we've all seen those people in New York that, the veteran that is asking for money, and maybe looking back on those images now, we can be more compassionate and empathetic towards them because it's not part of our culture and we don't feel uncomfortable with it. But that might have been a really uncomfortable painting back then for somebody to make. Yeah. You're exposing the downtrodden, the grittiness of like the failings of society. Like, look where we are has taken these poor people. Yeah, I talked to Max Ginsberg too, and he does a lot of more social realism, and I think there is a reality that people may have like a really visceral response to that, really strong emotional response to it, but would they want it in their living room is the question, right? And that, or even in a public space. I mean, if you've got a public building and you're in the 19th century and you have this painting exposing like this poor downtrodden family that can't get help, is that something you want to advertise in your public space? Yeah, or if you're talking about a business or something. But at the same time, I think, that's where museums come in. I mean, how many walls are taken up in museums by nonsense? Yeah. And I feel like that sort of social realism by Max Ginsberg or the beauty that Bert Silverman is finding in the world around him, to me, that's for public consumption. Yeah. I mean, I put it in my house, but I think not necessarily someone wants to hang for decoration though, as like, part of their living room. I think you're going to a museum to have this sort of wide array of experiences, and you're hoping to kind of have thought-provoking experiences there. So yeah, I mean, there's a perfect venue for every painting, but the thing that I love about the courage of a Burton Silverman or Max Ginsberg is that they've been in it long enough. They know these might be difficult to sell. Is there an outlet for this? Probably not. And they're making it. They're making it anyways, which is a really courageous. As a professional artist, it's a really difficult thing to do.
And I find myself frustrated at times because, I'm making another landscape that I love making, but I just think, like, who cares about this? Like, it's pretty, but is this, am I creating something whose, forever purpose is decorative? And I struggle with that back and forth because I love the beauty. I love something that where maybe the main message is just
This
something
is beautiful. Yeah.
I'll always be in love with that. Beautiful floral or a great portrait or whatever. But I also hope that I have a little bit something more to say than I just think everything's pretty. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, there is that, but I mean, I love nature. I love being outside. And I feel like people want to bring some of that into their homes because there is more to it. There is like this healing aspect to nature and being in that environment when you bring that into your home. And if somebody does it well, like it's more than just pretty.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. I think it does transmit more than just this is a decorative object. I think when you can really like reverence the landscape and elevate it and, bring about the emotion that somebody has when they're experiencing this kind of beautiful sunset or beautiful landscape, like it is more than just beauty, at least it is to me.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to that quote where you're allowing somebody to feel like they had a similar experience as you when you first saw it, or you're transmitting an experience to somebody that they can feel, and
you're sharing your experience, and there is like the human connection in that too. Like you don't look at a painting of a landscape and not have a piece of the painter in it.
I think I used to think about this in terms of movies. I saw the movie Glory when I was in junior high. And, white kid growing up in a white neighborhood.
Yeah.
I'd never even really considered racism or heard about it or thought about it. And I felt like when I left the theater, like that there was a part of that I lived, not the slavery part or the whatever, but there's the narrative where you get a look into that world that they created. And there's an empathy that develops because
that's the beauty of reading or watching movies. Like, especially with movies, there's like this psychological effect where your brain actually experiences it as if you are experiencing it. So it's interesting that you're saying that.
Yeah, and I think that's what a great painting can do is transmit something that takes something that you didn't experience and makes you feel like you did. Yeah. Okay, so I take back my feeling about
your landscapes
being purely
aren't just decorative. They're not.
That's my self-loathing getting in the way of.
No. That's not what it is, Ryan.
My decision making.
Definitely have a gift for that aspect of painting. I mean, your landscapes are moving. They're beautiful.
Well, thanks. I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier in terms of, always being somewhat uncomfortable or clumsy.
Yeah.
Part of that is my clumsiness in trying to decide what to paint next with all the ideas I have. And I've always got like 30 paintings going at the same time.
Yeah.
I have to think about it. This goes back to the business of it. I have to think about it from a responsibility standpoint. Like I'm supposed to be making money here.
Yeah, right.
If I'm going to spend time standing in front of this easel, is it am I being a responsible adult? Because when you make something, you just spend all the time doing it, you frame it, you ship it out.
Materials.
And you have not a whole lot of control over it when it goes out. And when things don't sell or they take 6, 8 months, 2 years to sell, it can feel very much like, am I being responsible? Have I ever, am I doing this just because I didn't ever want to grow up? Like, what am I really doing?
You're thinking too much.
Yeah. And now my wife has a job, so I see her sitting at a desk and working.
It's like you get the same paycheck every week.
Yeah,
It's
and I'm like,
wow, that actually works.
I'm totally an irresponsible adult. I'm a hobbyist that, I mean, there's that internal struggle constantly for me where I have to feel responsible for the time I'm spending in front of the easel.
Yeah.
So what I'm choosing to paint is so influenced by
Whether there's
what's going to
somewhere
happen
go
with this
for it.
after.
Yeah.
And I make dumb decisions all the time. I've done huge paintings that, like when I first graduated Florence Academy, I was all full of energy and I was like ready to come home. I had all these ideas and did these huge paintings. I had all this ambition, and it was 2008, so the timing was the worst.
Yeah, it was that big recession then, right?
Yeah, and so I just graduated, full of energy, come home, do these massive paintings for a gallery world that was plummeting right at the same time. And so I've made plenty of fiscally, dumb decisions.
You've been bold.
But I find that there's periods where I played it safe and long periods.
And how did that go?
It's
Was
far
it
less.
more
It's far less fulfilling.
financially
No,
successful?
not necessarily.
No.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, that's interesting, isn't
when
it?
it comes to the art world, this is the most frustrating part of it. Is I want to have control, and you have none, and you make what you make. And you have no idea who's going to see it, for one. You hope, with social media, you hope to spread it a little bit further.
Yeah.
But once you send it to a gallery, you don't know who's going to walk in. You don't know how they're going to present it necessarily, how they're going to talk about it. What people are going to have eaten. Did they sleep well that day? Or, when they, before they saw it, are they annoyed at their spouse when they saw it? Are they trying to impress a girlfriend? There's so many.
And I feel like all those feelings come through when you look at someone's painting too. So it seems like the most essential element of it is like this sincerity and this really wanting to paint it, because people most respond to the paintings, at least from mine, that are like the most personal and the most I feel exposed here, but those are the paintings that people relate most to.
Yeah, but in a lot of cases, you never know if they're going to sell or not. You could get an amazing response for a particular painting, and then
people can connect
own it
with
for
it
10 years.
A lot. Yeah.
Travis Schlott says it best. He says, make sure you make the paintings that you really love, because they'll probably end up on your wall.
Studio. Forever. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's a constant internal struggle, because I have to feel responsible, but then the most responsible thing I could do is to make the paintings that mean the most to me. And I've gotten better at that in terms of balancing that. And also, when paintings I made that I'm sure are going to sell immediately, I mean, everything I make, I really want to make.
Right.
I just want to make way more than I'm capable of making. I have far more ideas.
Many ideas.
Yeah, so
You're
it's a matter of picking out which ones to spend time on. So it is true that everything I make, I really want to make, but there's sometimes I'll choose something where I think this definitely will find an audience. And when
somebody will like it, and
when
then
those don't, then I go back to the easel and say, well, okay, I really wanted to make this one more. The reason I spent time on this is because I thought it would find a faster audience.
Yeah.
I thought this one might be a little bit more difficult. If neither of them are going to sell, do the one that
you love the most,
the biggest motivation.
Yeah.
Still, I struggle with that. I'm an adult man
struggle,
with a family.
And you've been doing this professionally for 20 years and supporting your family, or I don't know how long you've been doing this.
Yeah, 20 years.
Yeah, is that about right?
Yeah, 20 years this
20
year.
Years? Oh, I guessed right.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has to, figure that balance out for themselves. But for me, I can't, it's very difficult for me to separate this feeling of responsibility from,
I'm sure. Yeah.
From just making paintings. But also, just making paintings isn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be. There's something more I want to do beyond just making paintings. There is something very fulfilling about making paintings, but I find that since I closed the school...
You miss teaching?
I don't know if I'd say that.
No?
I don't know what it is. I can't really pinpoint it. I do. There's a feeling of usefulness for sure that I don't feel anymore. But there's something else maybe it's a ADD thing where I want to have more things going on, right? Whether that's planning a major retreat or
we gotta get on that.
Yeah, or I've thought about doing some sort of gallery idea because I love
running your own gallery.
Maybe, yeah, kind of. I love other people's work. I'm such a massive fan. I love talking about art. I love sharing art.
Yeah. Are you a good salesperson?
No, no.
Me neither. Oh man, I would be horrible at that job.
I could speak glowingly of the painters I love.
Yeah.
I can't really do that. I couldn't sell my own stuff.
You just have to have like these tactics that are they're manipulative and kind of
yeah,
like that would
true.
be hard for me. I just
it's true. Yeah, if you really, really want to be a great
if you're really
salesman,
good at it, like you have to like follow these sorts of principles.
Yeah, I think I'd have to have somebody in charge of marketing because that is something that I think is paramount, and I'm not good at all.
Okay.
Well, but the idea
you can hire a salesperson.
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty decent collection that I've kind of put together over the years. So I always think like it'd be nice to rotate it. And I love what I think. Who was it? Oh, it might have been Vern Swanson. It might have been Micah Christensen. I can't remember who said it to me, but they said, when you own a piece of art, you're they said it so much more eloquently. You have a responsibility
for it or something.
No, you're the
steward of it.
The steward of it.
I feel like I've heard this
That's
before.
right. Yeah, you're the steward of it, but it's not yours. It's always going to go somewhere else. You get to sort of babysit it for now, but it's going to go somewhere else. And I think I feel like that with the stuff I own. I love it. I want to live with it, but it'd be cool to rotate it, to sell one,
expand
buy another.
The audience somehow.
Yeah, and then the stuff I buy is like I want to know the artist. I'm lucky enough typically to know the artist, and if I don't know them, I reach out and I get to call them and have a Zoom call or something to find out more about them. But the idea of sharing other people's work and having a little part in building a broader audience,
like promoting people.
Yeah, promoting this type of art and showing people how amazing it is and getting them excited about it. Yeah, that part of the gallery idea is appealing to me, but the business side, I'm so uninterested in business. The more I think I should get into this and figure it out more and be better at this and be more disciplined, the more hateful I get about it. I just hate the selling paintings is the worst thing about making paintings.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's hard to I guess talk yourself up in a way.
It's just it's the attachment to money. I always thought if I had enough money in the bank and could live off of interest, I'd still paint, but I'd probably just surprise people with it. I'd just mail it to a friend and say,
"Oh, that's dangerous. What if they don't like it?"
Oh yeah, of course it's dangerous. Also,
it'll end up at the DI.
It's true that if people don't sacrifice for it, they're not going to value it as much.
Right.
The paintings I've given away, I don't think are
not as cherished.
Typically ever valued as much. So yeah, it's a bad idea, but.
But you thought intrinsically just painting for the sake of painting would be enough for you, and you're finding that maybe you need another piece.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Painting is great, but it doesn't complete me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you find that other thing.
I'll fill in the gaps somewhere. Somehow.
You will. You've got ideas.
Okay, I'm going to share a few more quotes.
Okay.
Might be a
I
little
like
random.
quotes.
I know you
so
like quotes.
I do like quotes. I collect them rapidly. So.
Here's a kind of funny one. This maybe will not be popular. It's by Darby Bernard, and I don't know who that is.
Never heard of him.
I don't know where I saw it.
Darby. That's a good name.
Art is too popular. If plumbing was as popular as art, if plumbing was as popular as art is, we would have amateur plumbers running around, brandishing wrenches and roto-rooters, climbing in and out of sewers, and writing gibberish about
Don't
pipe
we have
systems.
that on YouTube though? I mean,
And none of our toilets would work. I love it.
Oh gosh.
Oh boy. Let's see. Here's a very nice quote by John Tusa, director of the Barbican Center in London.
I don't know what any of those things are.
Me neither.
Okay.
But it's nice.
Go on.
The arts matter not for the instrumental reasons, but because they are universal, because they are non-material, because they deal with daily experience in a different way, because they transform the way we look at the world, because they offer different explanations of the world, because they link us with our past and open the door to the future, because they work outside routine categories, because they take us out of ourselves, because they make order out of disorder and stir up the stagnant with movement, because they offer a shared experience rather than an isolated one, because they encourage the imagination and attempt the pointless, because they offer beauty and confront us with the fact of ugliness, because they offer explanations but no solutions, because they offer a vision of integration rather than disintegration, because they force us to think about the difference between the good and the bad, the false and the true. The arts matter because they embrace, express, and define the soul of a civilization. A nation without arts would be a nation that has stopped talking about itself, stopped dreaming, and had lost interest in the past and lacked curiosity about the future. Not nice?
It is nice. And, you know, one thing he mentioned there, I guess, that is kind of applicable to all art is that it isn't, what did he say? That it points out the pointless, or what, I'm not sure what the phrase was, but like art is always superfluous to the daily needs of existence. Like it's something meta, it's something beyond like just survival. And it's always pointing towards something higher. It's this like experience beyond just like what we need for day-to-day existence. So
I had,
and that can apply to so many different things.
So many different things.
Yeah.
Sure. I wrote a paper as a senior in college, and I remember writing something about art being useless. And I think it was something like that art is useless, that society doesn't need it, that people don't need it, but you want to make it good enough to where when they experience it, they realize that even if they don't need it, they want it.
They don't physically need it.
Right.
But I think there is an emotional, spiritual level where art, you know, feeds the soul. And so there's like, you know, there's like that Maslow's pyramid of needs, where at the bottom there's the physical needs that everybody has. And as you climb up that pyramid, like they get more and more like metaphysical. And so people do have like emotional and spiritual needs. So in that way, art is something that is necessary.
Yeah, I don't know if I saved this quote, but hopefully I did. There's another thought that I had. Yeah, I did. Okay. A lot. I thought about this a lot when I was younger. This was, let's see, 2002, 2003. The internet was starting to become a big thing. Cell phones were starting to be a little bit more.
I think that's about the time I got my first cell phone.
Our connection.
Text messaging.
The ease of life was. You know, you didn't have to get out the encyclopedia to write a high school paper.
And you have like one paragraph to write your whole paper on.
Yeah, life started to get a lot more convenient. And so at that time, I was reading a lot of Louis L'Amour, who my grandpa had every one of them.
Louis L'Amour.
He's a Western writer.
novels. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very entertaining and fun,
Okay.
books.
I haven't read them, but
I read them every night, and
Okay.
I don't know, there's like 160
Nice.
of them, and I read them all like 3
Cool.
times. But there's a quote in a book called Bendigo Shafter, and it's all about the American Bendigo Shafter.
Okay.
It's all about the American West. And he says, for it was our way to go onward, to go forward, and to try to shape our world into something that would make our lives easier, even if more complicated. Our struggle was for time, our leisure was bought from hardship, and we needed leisure to think, to dream, to create. And
it's the title of one of your paintings.
It is.
Yeah.
And to me, that was always like he's painting this world of the American West when things were really difficult, when
just
the majority
survival.
of your day was survival. It was a constant sun up to sundown.
And that's been
effort.
the majority of human existence, I'm sure,
Right.
for everybody.
And now that we have and so leisure for them was precious because
Much
it was
more
so
meaningful.
rare.
Yeah.
When they brought, there's another book where he talks about if we traveled to the West, we only could bring so much, and if we brought any books, we brought the best books.
The best books.
And so there was a value to leisure that today we don't have. Because so much of
We have
life
so much more leisure.
is leisure, and so it's cheap.
Yeah.
And so we don't necessarily spend it on the best things because we have an abundance. And I think that leads to, obviously lack of attention span and a lack of value on the dreaming, the creating.
And what you take into your mind. And
Right.
yeah, I mean, there's just so much fluff.
Yeah. And that is, to degrade a society, I think all you have to do is provide an environment of stagnancy and kind of it's a way of turning off your mind. There's another thing. I don't know how far to get into this, but I've been listening a lot to like Robert Sapolsky and Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett on.
I don't know any of these people. Are they like podcasters or?
I believe Robert Sapolsky is a neuroscientist, professor at Stanford, and primatologist.
Oh, cool.
Sam Harris, I believe, is a neuroscientist. He does, a podcast, and he's Daniel Dennett also. Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett were 2 of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that are like raging atheists, along with Christopher Hitchens and.
Are they self nominated, the 4 horsemen? Or?
No, I think they just spoke about it enough where people kind of grouped them together.
Like people in the religious community, or like this is just kind of a joke?
I think it's just a way of identifying
who they are.
4 people that talk about it a whole lot.
Okay.
Richard Dawkins, I think, was one of them.
Okay.
But Sam Harris and Robert Sapolsky have both written books on the idea that there's no free will. And
It's super interesting, that idea, because you're so like influenced by your circumstances.
Right. Everything, basically they're saying, you could say, I do this because I want to do it, but where does the want come from?
Yeah.
And
trace it back.
Right. And the chaos of experience that comes into your life presupposes your decision making. Yeah. They've even done brain scans. They can now do brain scans on fetuses where they can see like the stress level of the mother, how that can affect the cognitive development of the fetus. And so how that is affected by lower income people, the prefrontal cortex is less developed in a higher stress environment. Yeah. So that goes into all kind of predictive situations for the person. And so in thinking about that, I don't necessarily feel, to me, what they're saying largely is we're basically just
like predestination, like
leaves on the wind, where we go wherever that wind.
You can't change your mind though.
But what I do feel like is important when you talk about, whatever you want to believe about that theory, there is a reality to diminished freedom relative to experience and intake of information and whatever. That the influence of the things around you, the people you surround yourself with, the conversations you have, the books you read, the travel that you do or don't do, all has a collective effect on how you think and how you make decisions and how you live your life and whatever.
Sure.
And for me, whether or not I have any free will is less important than concentrating on the influences that I surround myself with.
Yeah.
And I want to be very careful about the conversations I have, the not necessarily in terms of curating an echo chamber, but more so having conversations that stretch me and make me think more deeply about something than silly conversations about the latest Drake song or something, right?
Yeah.
And with my kids as well, like I don't know where they're going to go. I don't know what they're going to do. They don't really know yet.
You have not a lot of control over that either.
Right.
So.
But what I hope to do is at least give them some influence, expose them to ideas, expose them to good books, encourage more discipline and whatever, because if they hear it enough, maybe in the soup of experience, that'll nudge their decision making a little bit. But I think that has so much to do with, again, if there is no free will, then you can't do something deliberately. But I want to be as deliberate as possible about putting the best things in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I mean, there's always like these choices you can make. I mean, for me, I just love reading, and it's interesting, experiencing all these different worlds of different people and different ideas and things through that. And there's always like an opportunity cost of like, am I going to spend my time watching Friends or The Office, or am I going to pick up a good book?
Yeah. Which, I mean, downtime is great. I remember.
Yeah, I'm not saying like you shouldn't I definitely do here and there, but I find that like I can relax just as much reading a book, and maybe it's just this idea also of like time being short and like you don't have forever to live. So, there is that opportunity cost of what am I going to spend my time thinking about and focusing on.
So how does that then, I don't know how that's going to affect my art. I've gone through a number of significant changes in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, from having been brought up Mormon to now. I don't know if I can say I'm an atheist, because that's very definite, but I'm certainly atheist leaning. The amount that has changed my thinking and listening to Christopher Hitchens, who's brilliant, Sam Harris and other philosophers, reading Spinoza, trying to expand the way I think and see the world through travel, has had obviously a massive shift in my
huge
worldview.
When you're coming from this like highly controlled culture that tells you not to read things like you've been reading or listening to.
And then artistically, or now with even this new idea of the illusion of free will, I feel like I'm not sure how all of that plays into my motivations as an artist. I don't know. I haven't seen a massive shift with this completely, flipped worldview.
Yeah.
I don't see that it's had a huge impact on my art, other than
It doesn't have to.
Yeah, but you would think it would, right? I mean, you have...
Maybe before you had this massive shift, though, you were still tuning into this like pure center of yourself that's still coming out.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about philosophically, art being maybe, the best way for people to tap into who they truly are and what means the most to them.
Yeah, what resonates most with you. I think it's a very personal thing for each person. And if you're really making work that means something to you, I think you are like tapping into your core being and what you value the most.
Yeah. But what I value the most now, I
Doesn't
feel
seem
like
has changed that much in terms of
I
your
don't know.
art.
Maybe what I value the most hasn't changed, but the way I think, I feel like has shifted so much
Yeah.
that I would expect it to be, more obviously reflected in
Maybe
the art
it's
I'm
still
making.
Evolving.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because I'm diving a little bit more into philosophy, and I'm having
philosophy.
a lot of more varied conversations than I used to have. But I don't see a huge reflection yet
Not in your work.
what I'm painting necessarily.
We'll keep watching it and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like you're kind of at the beginning, middle stages of your career. Where do you think your art's going? What's your projection for your message? What matters to you?
What matters to me, I don't know.
Artistically, that you'd like to share artistically.
Yeah. I feel like my art that feels the most authentic to me often has like this sort of emotive psychological element to it. And I'm very interested in portraits and figures, but I'm more interested in like the emotion behind it, kind of. Lately, that's been sort of, my life's been a little bit weird lately, but it's been kind of like melancholy, I guess, the work I'm looking at over even the past several years. Yeah, and I think a lot of that has related to the oppression of like the religious system, and I'm kind of like still working through that. I mean, you and I have both, left Mormonism, which is a very high demand, high control sort of culture. And so I think, especially as a woman in that system, you feel very oppressed.
Yeah.
And like controlled. So I think I've been working through a lot of that. I hope that, that emotive quality can kind of expand and reach different aspects of human experience, because I don't want to feel melancholy forever. But there is always, I feel like, this connection to like psychology. I did my undergrad in psychology. I've always been very interested in thinking and thinking systems and things like that. But as far as my art goes, I want it to, like you have been saying, relate to people on a very personal level and to bridge that human experience. So even if it's a figurative or even just a portrait, like there should be some emotive quality that draws people in. And I think that definitely is going to be a part of my work as I move forward.
What scares you about painting, if anything? Like, are there themes? Are there maybe, painting large, maybe complexity, maybe technical aspects? Like, what is it? I mean, we all have our particular fears that we try to squash as much as possible. We try to paint as fearlessly as we can. We try to, be bold or paint really what's in our heart. But we are human, so there's fears and there's certain constraints, whether they're self-imposed or otherwise. What would those constraints be for you? What are the things that maybe fear is the wrong word, but what are the constraints that are very frustrating?
I think when I approach my art, I tend to be fairly bold in the way I think about it. I think the thing that's most scary for me in creating art is that I'm a very private person in general. I'm not, broadcasting myself. I've always been very introverted and quiet, and it feels okay, this is something my cousin said to me about her painting, that sometimes it feels like you're hanging naked on the wall. You know, it's not the painting. It's like you are so exposed. And I feel like because art for me is such a personal expression that the scariest thing is putting myself out there and like feeling like this is a piece of me that I'm putting out. Art is always being judged. I don't like that feeling. I don't like that feeling of people walking up to me and judging me and saying, you know, we like you or you don't, or we don't. And it's hard not to attach that personal feeling to my work when my work feels so personal.
Yeah.
So
it wouldn't be comfortable for you to have a one woman show and show up and just have everybody surrounding you, just praising you or critiquing you or
it's not necessarily that. It's just feeling like I'm putting these pieces of myself out into the world when I'm just kind of this like, I don't know that I'm like reclusive, but I don't share that much with a lot of people. When you get to know me well, like I am very much an open book, you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
we talk about whatever. But I'm not an extrovert. I'm not like just out there all the time. And when I'm putting my work in public spaces and it has deep personal meaning for me, it feels very vulnerable.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the scariest part about my work, because I have a hard time not making personal work. And it's like putting my personal self out there to have people walk by and, you know, sometimes, you know, you stand behind someone in a gallery talking about your work and you hear what they're talking about and you're like, I don't want to hear people talking about it. It's just, I guess that is uncomfortable for me to feel so exposed.
But that, in my experience, that feeling or the experience of getting direct feedback is rare. So you're left to collect and infer from either social media likes or maybe
rejections or acceptance, or
whether you win or lose,
or whether you get into a show, or I mean, there's always like avenues for.
Most of it is silence. Most of it is like you put something out there, and you're not in the room when people are talking about it. You don't. You don't. In my experience,
you know that they're
get very
talking
little
about
feedback.
it.
Right, exactly.
It's just knowing that it's out there. I think that is kind of hard for me. I mean, like you look at this drawing on the wall with the cards and the umbrella. That's like me. And it does have personal meaning, like symbolic meaning for me. And it's hard to put out there because it is very personal. And I just don't know how to not make personal work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Greg Mortensen once, and he's a very good friend. So, you know, we're very open with
Greg's
each other.
Awesome.
And I was saying, I just want to hear the things that people say about my work when I'm not in the room, because I think that'd probably be the most honest critique.
Yeah.
And then I can go back to the drawing board and try to like get better at some of the things that people are perceiving as, weak or whatever. And he said, well, that kind of supposes that people are talking about your work. And I was like, oh, that's even worse.
Exactly.
I as much as a negative feedback or you know, useful criticism, helpful criticism is still criticism. And it can be painful to hear because you want to pretend like you're doing everything well. But no feedback is
also feedback.
Yeah. No response is I think worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think everybody has those fears and that inner demon that says don't do it or you can't do it or you shouldn't put that out there or nobody's going to care or I think the hardest thing is to quiet that down and just let it fly, right?
Yeah,
I mean, out there as much as you
the
can.
hope is, I guess, you know, if I'm painting personal experience or, you know, that it can relate to other people's experiences too. So I think
Right.
the personal can be much more universal than the things that you just paint because you think people will like them. Because human experience, like we experience so many similar things, even though everything feels so personal and like nobody's felt this way before. I think we all experience so many familiar feelings, and when people are willing to put themselves out there, then you have this avenue of real connection.
Yeah.
That is scary because, you know, our own lives are personal and,
Yeah.
you know, but.
Yeah, I think what you're doing with art is you're sharing something personal, but what you've done through the creation of that work is you've really spent time in that emotion. You've spent time in that narrative.
Yeah.
You've broken it down. You've made the really difficult effort to take something maybe abstractly felt and put it into legible visual terms. And it's that organization of the emotion that when you share it, I think clarifies other people's emotions as well, right? Because not everybody spends that time kind of deconstructing and then reconstructing and organizing and really understanding. I remember Sherry King, friend of ours, painted, I'm going to say this wrong, her daughter, she has a trans daughter who's non-binary, I guess, now.
Yeah, probably they pronouns, I think.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
But painted them. And, you know, this is this whole family thing, and there's so much that goes into relationships and you know, finding out who you are, and then, you know, the parents embracing and...
and then painted them, and then their partner.
Right. And Sherry did this these amazing portraits, and there's something so powerful in the sort of vulnerable way that she painted it. Yeah. Painted both of those portraits, and the love and connection, and I think she won an award for it.
She got first place at the Spring Salon.
Yeah, as she should have.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of willingness to share like the deepest part of you, the most personal part of you, like you said, and I've said it earlier as well, there's a common connection that we have as human beings through our experience that makes it helps people connect with it, again, which I think representational work does far more fluidly and effectively than pure abstraction. But yeah, I guess it's not a good place to wrap it up. How long have we been going?
I have no idea. Gosh, 2.5 hours or something?
Really?
2 hours?
Jeez. Okay. Well, yeah, thanks for letting me in your studio. I'm sure we're going to have more discussions.
Yeah.
I do want to say at the end of this, if anyone has any suggestions about topics, we talk about stuff all the time, so it doesn't necessarily occur to us what might be interesting to other people, or maybe things that we haven't covered before. It'd be nice to not be saying the same things over and over all the time.
Don't want to do that.
But I did get the art education thing out of my system, so
Good.
hopefully I don't
I've
have
heard that
to
before.
ramble on about that nonsense anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to, if these conversations are helpful, just you know, subscribe to the page. That's helpful, and feel free to comment with dissenting opinions or questions or whatever. And we're going to try to have more of these with Katie and
just friendly
other
conversations.
Friends. Yeah, stuff we all tend to.
We shoot the breeze about when we're painting or whatever.
Yeah, topics we tussle with, and you know, things we're frustrated by. Yeah, I think they can be useful and interesting to other people. So thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah,
and,
thanks for coming to my studio and dealing with the puppy. He's calmed down a little bit, but...
yeah, we'll do it again soon, hopefully.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
That's it.